you start untangling that ball of yarn and adding that in with the cult, and consider that when you look at
Thank you for joining me on the Unrefined Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Spain, along with Lindsy Waters, where each week we delve into the mysteries that shape our world, from the tangible to the supernatural, with the foundation rooted in biblical truth. For more content and exclusive resources, visit us at unrefinedpodcast.com. Now, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, you guys, we're back for another episode, and this is going to be a very informative one. We're diving into a pretty serious topic. But when it comes back to peeling back the layers of fringe history, if you do it with the depth and the grit of today's guest, through her platform, Rotting Jewels, she dives headfirst into the tangled web of cults, counterculture, and conspiracies, uncovering the truth behind some of the most disturbing and shadowy movements in modern history. From the sinister origins of the Process Church to its eerie influence on pop culture and beyond, her research doesn't just scratch the surface. She's bold, brilliant, and not afraid to follow the truth wherever it leads. We welcome to the show today, Dana Duda. How you doing, Dana?
I'm good. Thank you so much for the awesome intro.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you have been a huge influence with Lindsay and I in our research, and we're kind of going after. I mean, just to put it bluntly, we're kind of realizing that the United States is, in a lot of ways, basically just a big cult and a psyop. I know I could probably get in trouble for saying that. But let me get us started here with a little background about you. How did you get started studying the Process Church? What drove you into this?
So, I was working through a thesis that I haven't let go of. I still think it's true, I just haven't revisited it. But working through the timeline of making the argument that L. Ron Hubbard is the late Lieutenant Colonel Absissimus Michael Aquino's father. So, in that timeline, going from the 40s all the way through until Hubbard's death, I knew I was going to come into the process. And when I got to it, I think I can't remember the name of the show. He doesn't do it anymore, but he had done a comparison of Maury Terry's The Ultimate Evil, the original publication, and kind of a contrasting compare with Love, Sex, Fear, and Death. And Timothy Wiley had mentioned some things, and I was like, wait a minute. L. Ron Hubbard said the exact same thing about when he was in that place. And so I was like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. And then I started to look, and Timothy Wiley's not his real name. You see that the story about Robert and Mary Ann isn't true. You're able to kind of really start ripping apart that book, but that book is, the best place to start because it's technically coming from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. But like we said before the show, in a lot of ways, it's propaganda. It's intended to paint the process in that light, in my opinion.
Well, it's funny you said nobody I know starts this looking for the process. It just kind of pops up when you're looking at something else. For me, we did a series on Laurel Canyon, and I tackled the Manson part of that, and I had heard something about them before related to him, but it just sounded like another satanic cult to me. And yeah, I read Ed Sanders' book and found out more about it, and it just,
the real version of Ed Sanders' book.
Yeah, first edition.
Yeah.
Found it. Lucky to find one while there was still some semi-affordable, but yeah. So yeah, no one seems to look for the process. I mean, I don't
except
know
for
anybody
Ed.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Ed was like the only one, and it's unfortunate because in his later updates of the family, he provides so much more and it's so fruitful, but he has to refer to them as a British satanic cult. That's what he refers to them as, but he is talking about the process. But the fact that he released his book before Vincent Bugliosi did, and he knew so much about the process from being there, sort of boots on the ground. I've been to his archives twice at Princeton. He walked so that everybody else could run. He did a lot of the legwork.
Yeah, well, we've noticed that through your show. I mean, you keep going back to the stuff you found in his archives and stuff. I'm like, Lindsay, we need to make a road trip or something, bro, and just do some I'm sure it's all on microfiche, probably not even in computer stuff. So,
It's
but
all in boxes that still smells like a barn because it was in a barn for like 10 years.
oh wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Yeah. So let's just start off with they're described as it's just like this fringe cult. I wouldn't say they're described as harmless, but they're a fringe cult that's ideologically like the blueprint behind certain ritualistic crime. But how deep do you think their influence really went in shaping the behavior of Berkowitz and the whole Son to Sam killers?
I think that if you look at the process
Yeah.
and don't disconnect it from Scientology, because it is a part of Scientology and that's really important.
Okay.
I think that it's a normal thing to do,
Hmm.
to just kind of separate both of them, but it is a part of Scientology. Scientology has orders that are written, it's a policy, it's called R245, to shoot somebody in the head with a gun. And it's dropping the body. So, like, you're forcing somebody to leave their body. It's this whole weird thing with Hubbard. But I think when you combine Scientology, which we know that Michael Carr was a Scientologist, right? He
Yes.
was apparently
Yeah.
a high-ranking Scientologist. Now,
Yeah.
something interesting about that it's often overlooked. The org that Michael Carr was working out of in New York, there's a woman named Paulette Cooper. She wrote a book called The Scandal of Scientology. I think this was back in like the 70s. When the FBI did their raid, they found through all of this paperwork that they had ran this massive black op on her. She had a boyfriend. The boyfriend tried to get her to end her life. They actually framed her with a bomb threat to Henry Kissinger with her fingerprints
Wow.
and everything, and she went to jail. Like, she had a trial and everything. So I'd like to remind people of that because who's to say that the church wasn't involved in setting up those letters from David Berkowitz? The handwriting varies, the language varies, the whole, like, everyone's fair game in one of the letters, I feel like
Yeah.
that's just a weird Scientology nod. But as far as the actual crimes themselves, because they seem chaotic and sort of not following a particular pattern, and I think that there may be an argument for that. I don't endorse the newest, victim that has been pinned on David Berkowitz at all.
Yeah.
I
Who's
think
that?
that
Who's the newest victim?
boy, her name is Wendy Savino, and
Okay.
it's some very in my opinion, very shoddy detective work with some very, very shady characters. There's absolutely no proof that David
Was
was
this
involved.
was this before the other ones came out? It was a prequel sort of
No,
killing.
this just got pinned on him a couple months
Okay.
ago. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that they're trying to close their books on stuff. This is actually hopefully going to be litigated soon, but I don't endorse that. And that one, Wendy Savino falls out of anything close to any of the other victims as far as like, young, sort of like Lover's Lane, this and
Yeah.
that. It's
Yeah.
completely different. I don't think he did that. But as far as the other ones, David said that he was a lookout for a lot of those crimes, right? And then he admitted to pulling the trigger at, I think, maybe two or
Two of
three,
them.
and one of the
Yeah.
stabbings that predated a lot of that. I believe his original statement as far as him being involved in that. I think that there is an argument to be made that the children cult, which already existed, because when you actually look at a lot of process genealogy, there a lot of these people come from Westchester County. They come from Yonkers. I think the mixture of the children cult already being well established and then the process coming in, Scientology, the process, I think that they were playing the game of the gods, which is a process game. And was it an initiation ritual? Maybe. Was it using a little bit of Scientology technology with the gun?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It's nobody can really say for sure. I think that Carl Denaro has been pretty solid on who he thinks shot him, and it was a woman.
Mm. Mm.
Interesting.
You go into the game of the gods a little bit. I've heard that one, but I've never had it really explained.
So I have not played it myself, and I refuse to read the whole board because I feel like it's kind of meant to drive you nuts. In that documentary, Sympathy for the Devil, one of the guys that they interview says that they played it with his friends, and like those none of those people talked for like years after that. It was one of the worst nights of their lives. But it goes through birth, your teenage years, intimacy, death, murder. There's the game of rape that's involved in that. It's that big 2-page board. It's in a big compilation book of theirs where you can
Okay.
read it. And it shows like, and it's interesting because it does kind of have that Scientology vibe where it's, there's psychiatry and Catholicism and things that Scientology is very anti, kind of all in the middle around this. But the rape game is the big thing on that board.
Mm.
But it's just, finding different purposes to send you down your path, whatever that may be.
And you talk about it like this, and we know we can get into Manson in a minute or two, but just the sheer nature of what you're talking about requires, number one, an incredible amount of planning and strategy. Number two, multiple people involved. Now, the big thing people will say is, how can you have this many people involved and keep it secret? And I always go back to, well, I mean,
They don't
Freemasonry.
always.
Well, and they don't always, but Freemasonry's done it for hundreds of years. They're ritualized into it, like you said. To get in, you rape or kill someone or whatever, and they got blackmail on you, so to speak, and so you're quiet usually. What I'd like to know though is it part of the whole propaganda thing with Scientology and the process to always want to pin it on a lone gunman, like all these things, all these killers are all separate, their
Oh,
own
yeah.
entities.
Oh, yeah. They wanna pass the buck no matter
Yeah,
what. It's,
yeah.
it wasn't us. It's not our influence that's, causing anything negative. And to speak to, I think a good way to describe it would be systemic corruption is Mike Codella, who was a former NYPD investigator. He has spoken many times about. Literally, he was privately investigating Robert DeGrimston, like, he was going through Robert DeGrimston's trash when Robert was living on Staten Island, trying to figure out where he worked and stuff. But one of these informants that was in a motorcycle gang that did, security for one of the cults talked about being there at one of these doctors' houses with all of these rich people, cult people, the biker gangs, drugs, and this is in New York in the '70s and the '80s, and that they sacrificed a child, that they did
Mm,
this whole thing. And he also described another crime where it was a woman, and he was actually involved in the commission of the crime, the ritual. And while Mr. Codella has not come forward with a name or a specific date so that other people can see it, which is unfortunate, he said that they were able to close the books, that it was a woman that was ritually sacrificed in a park with a sword.
mm,
Mm.
He was like, "The information that he gave us, it was an open case." He's like, "We were able to close the case. The information wasn't bad."
mm. Interesting. So, on your podcast, we're actually kind of going through both your YouTube videos as well as your podcast too, because I was trying to just get basics of the process and from somebody I trusted other than propaganda and stuff like that. Do you feel like that? And this is something we're kind of toying with a theory. Do you feel like the process or Scientology is involved in more than just Manson and like the Sons of Sam? And are there other serial killers that were programmed to kill, so to speak, to use David Gowan's book? I mean, do you see their tentacles in just about all these things, or do you think that it's just a few? Your
So,
opinion.
in my opinion, I see Scientology as, kinda like the big umbrella, right? And
Yeah,
then,
yeah,
you have, like, the process, you have the Satanic Temple of today, and then you have Best Friends Animal Society underneath it. Now, the tricky
right.
thing with the process is, even though they claim that they whittled down their gods to just Jehovah, they didn't. So, you have these 4 deities where they can mix and sort of match into the Jesus movement of the '70s. I have them at the Billy Graham revivals, like, they're everywhere.
Wow,
But
I didn't know that. Cool.
I think that the element of Scientology and the process, where Scientology really wants you to disconnect from your body.
Yeah.
You're not a part of your body, and we're here to, like, save the planet. Same thing with the process, except for they have a real hard bend on animals. I think that it's, like, the process, I think that the Weather Underground, I think that these groups are all the same. I think that they're all connected because at the root of it, their ideologies are the same and so are their MOs. And like Squeaky Fromm, from the Manson family. She said, "We have to go out and kill people to raise their awareness about environmental issues." And
Yeah.
it's like, "Okay, that's great. Why are you saying that when John Lonely Frazier literally said the exact same thing?" And there were multiple people that saw John Lonely Frazier with other people, some of them who looked like girls from the family. And he said that he wasn't alone. When you read those court transcripts, John Lonely Frazier's trial is second to the Manson case as far as it was just a kangaroo court, basically. Like,
Mhm.
they pinned those crimes on that guy. And I think that maybe Herbert Mullen, there may be an argument there. I just don't think it's a coincidence that all of these serial killers came out of San Francisco, Santa Cruz area in a very short amount of time all at
Yeah.
once. It doesn't seem to be organic, and neither do the animal slayings either. And then obviously, like New York, okay, there's the stuff going on in New York. And then I think as well, the Hand of Death cult. I think that I'm not that far into it because I'm not there in my timeline, but I think that there is an argument to be made there because I know that the process was very prominent in Florida at that time and Georgia. And there's some argument to be made that they may be involved in some of the Atlanta child murders.
Yeah, that's where I was gonna ask next.
Yeah. That was interesting. I think I remember that case from something I read by John Douglas. I think he was involved with that case or something, which I'd be interested in hearing your take on John Douglas, Dana.
Yeah, I have no polite things to say about John Douglas at all. I think that that man is a total con.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the Atlanta child murders was the first time that the FBI rolled out the behavioral science unit, which is kind of tragic. But it's very strange. John Douglas, in his book Mindhunter, when he's discussing the Atlanta child murders, he
Yeah.
doesn't discuss meeting with Poppy Bush. Yeah, Senior Bush came to town to visit to make sure that the investigation went the way that they wanted it to go. And I'm like, what does that mean, John? Like, can you please expand on this for the class? But he continues and says that because Wayne was only convicted of killing two adults, and he says, we know who did it. He doesn't believe that Wayne killed those kids. He said, we know who did some of them. He said, it's not pretty, and the public, they wouldn't be able to take it. That's what he says in his book. He acknowledges that those cases were essentially closed in the public eye and pinned on Wayne Williams,
Yeah.
likely because of the pornography ring
Yeah.
that was in the area where multiple victims were seen, near that person's house. But because the photographs and films that were found in that guy's house were white kids, they didn't include it. And they didn't
Mm,
investigate those guys. Now, one of the individuals, one of the most prominent individuals, because they did arrest them, but completely separate. It was just for the material that they found in their home.
Right. Another
One of
case.
those
Yeah.
guys, I've been trying to track him because he has 20 different AKAs, and I'm putting out a FOIA on him, but it would appear that he has a very similar sort of lifestyle professionally as John Wayne Gacy as far as being out on the road. Because people like to think of John Wayne Gacy as just like in Chicago, right? Like he's just there, and it's really weird that he's, friends with a lot of famous politicians and stuff like that. But is it really that weird considering what he was doing? He was working on the road a lot, and so was this guy. And so I think that there might be some crossover there. I just don't want to jump the gun and speak too early. But I do think that for some of the victims, because Dave McGowan talks about it in Program to Kill, about a house that was found with like the Bible open, nailed to a wall about child sacrifice. That was the verse that was there, and a burnt cross. I found those old newspaper articles. There's photos of it. You can see it. Like something happened in that house. And they said it smelled like rotting flesh. So
mm.
Were all of those crimes attributed to it? I don't think so. I think that there's multiple networks at play. I think it's the cult angle. I think it's the organized crime angle, but I think that the big part of it is pornography, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
That's the angle that nobody ever wants to talk about with any of these cases.
Yeah. Or even what do you call them? Snuff films.
Yeah.
That
Well,
aspect
yeah,
of
that's
yeah,
I
yeah.
categorize that as
It's
part of their
pornography. Yeah,
pornography,
yeah,
because if they're
yeah.
making the porn and they're committing these crimes, then what's the natural conclusion of that? Snuff.
Well, that was big in the Sons of Sam case with that. What was that rich guy that had the out on the?
Roy
It
Radin?
was yeah, Roy, yeah, and then his little go between guy that was the one that they traced him to that I think he was he killed?
Ronald Sussman?
Sussman, yeah, I think he was killed, was he?
Yeah, Ronald Sussman ended up I think Ronald Sussman and I can't remember his girlfriend's name, but I can't remember which crime it was, but they said that Ronald Sussman had the equipment for one of the shootings and that it was filmed, and it's really interesting the argument that people like to make, even though they forget that Melanie Hollerman was, assaulted on camera at Roy Radin's house, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And they're like the people that are the naysayers or the truthers of the Son of Sam community, as I like to call them. They say that that type of equipment, such as, a handheld video recorder, anything of that sort, far too advanced for its time. Not possible to make that happen. It would be too complicated and you would have to have money. These are people that I would say are being completely disingenuous because when you look at the Manson case, it's all over the Manson case. Handheld recorders were out at that time. Roman
yeah,
Polanski had one. Quite a few
yeah.
people in Laurel Canyon had their own. So it's not really that big of a stretch. I just think that if you start untangling that ball of yarn and adding that in with the cult and consider that when you look at these different cults, you gotta wonder, how they have so much money for all this real estate stuff, right? Because that's usually where they put their money into. It's probably because of this kind of stuff, because they're certainly not getting it from their congregants.
Well, and I think Scientology has deep pockets, but this begs the question of who has the biggest pockets of all. I mean, the government, and what is the government's um, involvement? The CIA and all this is a big social experiment or a psyop type thing to create culture. When we dove into the Laurel Canyon, we really discovered that a lot of the whole scene out there, which I love the music, but I mean the whole scene out there they were all government. They were all from New York. Interestingly enough, not all of them, but or somewhere in Virginia. I think Arlington or somewhere. They went to school together, and with Jim Jones, dad being an admiral, and so I just wonder. And it might
Jim
not be.
Morrison.
Yeah, I say
Okay.
Jim Morrison. What did I say?
You said Jim Jones.
Yeah, that's another story. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, Jim Morrison and Admiral Morrison. I don't know if it's necessarily because the government's so compartmentalized. If it's necessarily the government as much as it is like what you're talking about, the Scientology and the process in these groups infiltrating the government. Is that probably a better assessment of what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people look at Scientology and their infiltration of the IRS, Operation Snow White, and they're like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's edgy. Look at, they did that. And I'm like, no, it's not cool. They tried to make it look cool, like they infiltrated. But I think that, like, for instance, someone who is today a very prominent processian, who's not a pleasant man, William Sims Bainbridge, he works for the National Science Foundation. He's consulted with the government for decades. But also, it's not just our government, it's also other nations' governments as well, because the process has such deep connections to British
UK.
intelligence, MI5, MI6, some of them, Polish intelligence as well when you're looking at some of the older scenes. And then with Hubbard in particular, you have the Office of Naval Intelligence because he was a naval spook.
Yeah.
Navy pulls rank over the CIA. Like, when it comes to the pecking order, Navy is high above the CIA. And it's, people are like, oh, well, what about the church committee hearings? And it's like, well, who got punished? the CIA. The Navy had the exact same type of program. So did the
The Air
Army.
Force too. Yeah.
The Air
Yep.
Force, all of them,
Yeah.
they all had
Yeah.
their own, and none of them got punished. Those programs didn't stop. We have not seen anything that said that those programs stopped. So,
Well,
while I'm not saying that the CIA isn't dangerous, it's just I think that a lot of this is naval stuff.
Convenient patsy when you
Yeah.
need to say, "Oh, we've been bad here." Slap the CIA on the wrist again, and
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Well, it's almost like a fractal. If y'all know what I mean by a fractal, it's like the CIA, they have patsies, and then the CIA is a patsy, and then it just goes up the scale, and then you go from that to like you talked about the wider global aspect of it, that's bigger than the United States. And we interviewed a guy named Robert Frederick, and he has a lot of interesting research on what he calls the Gnostic Empire, and the fact that the Britain is still in charge of the United States and still has major ties and major control in the United States, which that just blows people away. But I just think it's extremely fascinating. It's almost like Britain, in one hand, pointed us. We didn't end the slave trade, and in the other hand, they started it. Just different things like that, and it's been going on for hundreds of years with British influence in the whole American governmental thing. So, a lot of people, I'll get in trouble for like, are you bashing the United States? And yeah, no, I'm actually just bashing the bad players of the world. And it's bigger than the government. It's bigger than the United States. And like you said, it's bigger than the CIA, who seems to be the patsy. Now, I'm not giving them a skate at all. But you're right. These military intelligence have a lot more power and money as well too. So, have you heard I guess the newest type thing that MKUltra has kind of transformed itself from monotalk type stuff to more psychedelics? We just got introduced to a guy named John Potash. You've probably heard of him.
He wrote Drugs as Weapons Against Us.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about him and his research and with MKUltra with psychedelics and stuff?
I think that his book is a staple. Now, don't get me wrong, I highly disagree with some of his conclusions, but I think that his research is really well done, and it
Yeah,
evaluates so many counterculture figures, throughout the decades. It's not just in the '60s during the anti-war movement, and
right.
I think that he does lay out a really strong argument as far as, things now, do I think that any of these movements were ever organic? No, I don't think that they were, but he
Yeah,
does show that there was a big pivotal change when certain drugs were introduced at certain times. So I think that his argument is valid, absolutely. I just, I have my sort of gripe with like the Weather Underground. I don't see them as like even the SDS. I don't see them as anything organic or grassroots. And I mean, even the fact that former members identified it themselves as a cult, they were doing all these cult things, even though they would call it like Maoist struggle sessions. It's the same thing the process was doing,
yeah.
sitting there yelling at each other. But like the SDS and Weather Underground were also having orgies and taking lots of drugs. And so was the process. And it's like, what is the difference? There is no difference here, people. Like, these are
Same
all the
MO.
same. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the exact same amount.
yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's almost like it reminds me of Operation Mockingbird. I mean, it's like they're all programmed to do the same type things, which shows me, like you said, a single source or maybe some multiple sources that are in line with each other, and that's what makes me think that it's and maybe psyop is not the right word for it, but it's just a big experiment to see how they can manipulate culture and also just develop more power for their power base. And I really like how you say, well, let's not forget about Scientology. I mean, everybody is so afraid of them because they come out fighting when you go too deep in their territory and stuff. You had any kickback from the Scientologist or
Oh, yes.
okay.
They've tried to make my life a living hell. Um,
Really?
oh yeah. A very long story. I'll give you the condensed version. Lost my house. Had to
Huh?
move out of state, and am still being stalked and harassed and all kinds of death threats, all kinds of stuff. They're wild. My thing with Scientology is, like, Leah Remini came out and did that show, right? And, like, exposing Scientology.
Yeah.
She didn't expose anything. These people are not anti-Scientology, they're anti-David Miscavige. That's the thing.
The new guy,
Um,
yeah. Well,
they believe in the tech. They believe in Hubbard's technology, like, that
yeah,
works.
yeah.
The tech works, all of that, but
Okay.
they don't tell everybody that. And so what you hear from former members, especially out in, like, YouTube spaces, is Scientology's numbers are dwindling, and I'm like, "Where are you getting this information from? I see no proof of that. Just because they have buildings that they own that nobody's in them and you don't see people going in, I don't believe you, because Scientology used to be like a status symbol. It was a symbol of wealth. It was a symbol of celebrity. It was something that celebrities did, like, and it's not that way anymore. And I think that part of that is via propaganda by design of Tom Cruise being David Miscavige's lackey, acting like a clown, jumping up and down on couches, whatever. And
Yeah.
then also Leah Remini coming out and doing her show. I think that a lot of the Scientologists now are doing what every other cult has done for the past, 50 years. They've gone underground. They're just
Yeah.
hiding now. They're not as public about it.
Well, and the best way to control the flow of information is to come out first and do your own narrative first.
Yeah.
And make it look like Leamy did, like that. Oh yeah, they're bad, but like you said, they were going after him because of his wife and her disappearing and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't really about the core doctrines or the processes of the pun intended of Scientology. And I wonder, and maybe you can shed some light on this for us too. The whole origin story, so to speak, of the process church, is that even legit? Did Grimston and was it Marianne? Mary?
Marianne.
Yeah. Did they really get disgruntled and leave and all that stuff, or was it just like Scientology just kind of smearing and sending missionaries out, so to
Yeah, that's the
speak?
other thing.
And
It sent them out.
yeah. So
So
what do you think? Yeah.
you're you're onto something with the missionary thing, because the church does have a policy that someone can be declared a suppressive person to protect their cover, right? So Robert and Marianne were declared in, I think it was December of 1965. They were declared suppressive people. Now, as far as the origin story goes, they were Scientologists. In Love, Sex, Fear, and Death, you'll notice in the timeline in the beginning of the book, it actually says that Robert's younger brother was technically the first one to join. He would have been a teenager at that time. I've found no proof of that. I think it was put in there to confuse people. Robert and Marianne were Scientologists. Robert was actually married. His sister is the goddaughter of Lady Wachter de Grimston. He was knighted or something like that almost 10 years before he met Marianne, so that's where the name de Grimston comes from. The story of Marianne coming in and her evil, devilish, womanly ways, and telling him,
Yeah.
hey, de Grimston sounds cooler, let's change it to that. That's not true. That was his name
Okay.
10 years before he met her.
Well, what about her power? Like in this whole situation, was that accurate or was that just a ruse too?
I think it's over exaggerated, and I think that we're
Yeah.
not gonna know until Robert de Grimston passes away. He's still alive. He's in Florida right now. He's very old, but I think because of the power that his family holds, I don't think that we're gonna get the truth about everything that happened in the interim. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think that she was a very manipulative woman, and I think that Timothy Wiley just had a really big gripe with her. It's consistent throughout all of his books over the
Even
years.
even kind of alludes to it in the book. Yeah. Yeah.
He goes full stop in some of his other books in his Watchers series. So
Mm.
I think that there's something there, but Robert, his first wife, according to the divorce records in court, his first wife cheated on him. That's why he wanted a divorce. Whether that's true or not, who knows? Now, immigration services, their reports say that Robert was L. Ron Hubbard's right-hand man. I think that's fascinating if that's true, right?
Yeah.
Because then that
Yeah.
would mean that maybe they concocted this whole thing together about the process.
Yeah.
Um, but they do end up leaving. There's no proof that they were ever called compulsions analysis. There's nothing. There's no documentation. There's absolutely nothing. I think that that is just a short story, basically a lie.
Yeah.
The company was actually called RMS and MS Day Grimston Limited. Little lack of creativity on the name there.
Yeah.
But that is the company that they used and that they were operating under. Now, another reason why I think that they were sent out by the church is because when you read through the company documents, their stated purpose is like occultic research and religious research and research into like the human mind and the concept of the spirit and stuff. So it's like they were being tasked with doing a job.
Mm-hmm.
And they are using the e-meter, they called it the P-scope, the entire time. They leave in
Yeah.
what, 63? So that's 2 years that they're still out there using it. They don't get declared for 2 years, but when they get declared in 65, nothing really happens. There's no fair game that's run on them. The only thing that happens is in 1966, the British Medical Association was threatening to shut them down because they were making people sign waivers that if your mental health was affected, that you could not come after them. So that's why they went to Mexico. It isn't because they had a vision or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's why they left, because they were hiding. Depending on who you ask, when they're in Mexico and Stuhl, they were beating themselves in huts and Satan was finding them or they were finding Satan. The Church of Scientology says that they were doing paramilitary training, which is, I think there's truth to probably both of those stories.
Yeah.
And then they become the process in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Dana, can you connect the Satanic Temple to all this? Like, are they just another bastard child, or are they much more involved, or,
This
or
is a
what's
this
their?
is a
Yeah.
Aquino.
No,
Yeah.
no, Lucian. I forget his name. Is that who I'm thinking about?
Lucian Greaves, aka
Yeah.
Doug Messner, aka Doug Masico. Oh, he
All right. Yeah.
and me and him, that man does not like me. And neither do his congregants. Oh no, it's amazing what these people confess if you sit there and listen. So they're I can't think of the name of the podcast. It's a podcast though that is promoted by the temple. And they've had Doug on many times. I'll find the name and I'll send it to you guys. But
Cool.
William Morrison from Skinny Puppy, who was part of the founding of the Satanic Temple, has been on there many times. He has said himself that he was the middle person between the process and the temple. And then Doug has said himself that the Baphomet statue is based off of process theology. It's the
Really?
reconciliation of opposites. Yeah, he says
Yeah.
that it's all based off of that. They also have an e-meter at their location in Salem. He gets real panicky. I've tried to debate him about the process, and I don't use conjecture. I don't use like what they tried to accuse me of, which is like satanic panic nonsense.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, no, you're saying that the statue is based off of processian theology. So if we're going to follow that through, the process teaches that it's okay to kill. So does the temple believe that? Do you guys have outer teachings like the process? Like there's outer processians and inner processians, and there's different rules, and there's a hierarchy. Like the public has a right to know, if this is what you guys are doing, especially since you guys have tax exemption status and you like to run around and cry persecuted Satanist about everything. He won't touch it.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder. I lived through it, so I just wonder how much of the Satanic Panic was just a smokescreen, just a ruse. But yeah, I even wondered that back when I was a teenager and all this was going down. How much of it's real? How much of it's propaganda? And anyway, yeah, that's just fascinating. So, do you think, Dana, that the process has I guess splintered would be the good word for it. That's what I want to use it because it's not really have kind of divided up and infiltrated different, even coming into like Christian circles and Christian churches and like I'm talking about like mainstream type stuff. Do you think that they send people to infiltrate different organizations and to influence?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, because, you know, I think the most common place that people would have reference to in pop culture would be the Sons of Sam documentary on
Yeah.
Netflix, which is made by a friend of Mr. Lucian Greaves, aka Doug Messner, aka Doug Masico, which is fascinating, right?
Well, Lindsay told me that you're not a fan of that documentary, which I read the book and I'd watched the documentary, then I read the book, and I'm like, this book and the documentary is nothing alike. I mean,
But which book
Maury,
did you read?
Yeah, we got the one where Zeman has the forward.
yeah,
So, yeah, the bad one.
which
So
would make
it's
Maury,
not, that's
it
not
would make
Maury's
Maury
book.
Terry, he would roll over in his grave if he knew this guy wrote his introduction to this book.
Yeah. Well, no, he edited that book. There's an entire
Did he?
chapter missing from that book.
So where do you find the old version of it? I see it. It like
There's
has a
some online.
dog on
There's
it or
some in the
something.
Wayback. You can find it in the Wayback. I think that they still have the 1998 edition on Kindle. I know the original one with like the German Shepherd dog. It's a really cool cover.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
one of my friends found one of those on eBay recently and ordered it. That was the first version I read, though. I'm not judging you because that was the first one I read, and I'm like,
Right.
even Josh Zeman couldn't like rewrite that book in a way where I don't think that Wheat Car was involved. Like,
Yeah.
I still thought that
Yeah.
Wheat was involved,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So the version on Internet Archive that's the same thing as Wayback, pretty much, isn't
Yeah.
it? Or yeah, but yeah, it had a different name for second Manson guy, who's I can't remember his real name now, but it had a different name for him.
Tex.
No,
Are you talking about Manson 2, Bill Menser?
yeah, Bill Minster. Yeah, but
Manson too.
it had a different name for him.
So I think that Maury was still using aliases for certain people in those
Okay.
books, but I would highly recommend, at your leisure, because again, I was the one I started with Zeman's book as well. I read the book before I saw the series. Get the original or the most updated version, which I think again is like 1998, maybe 2002. I actually have a video on my channel that shows where one of my friends goes through every single thing page by page, every omission, because Josh took out a lot. He took a lot of liberties with that book, and me and Josh have not had pleasant
No,
exchanges.
the book has just become a way for him to promote the freaking documentary, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Well, it's not only that. This is kind of a side thing, but
Yeah.
in his podcast, you hear him with Maury, right? Or he's like talking about Maury and,
Yeah.
how much Maury's coughing and this and that, almost as if he's like trying to kind of plant the seed of Maury's like this crazy old man and
Yeah.
everybody thinks that he's crazy. And then he does what he does with the book, which was just blatant disrespect, in my opinion, and a total character assassination with the documentary. But the first person that actually got in touch with Maury before his passing was James Franco. It was James Franco. And James Franco did a show called The Deuce. The Deuce, which I think was on HBO, The Deuce is everything in Maury's research files, but they just take out the cult part. So what do you have? You have
Nothing.
drug trafficking and you have pornography.
Pornography. Yeah.
So you have two people connected in Hollywood, right? Like, I'm not saying like Josh is like super connected, but he's connected to an extent, right? I think he's more connected through his parents via like the literary scene. But you have these two individuals who, did Franco get to Maury's files first or did Josh? Who really knows? They do the Deuce. Franco does make a Son of Sam series. It's about 15 minutes long in total, maybe 20 minutes. It's all on YouTube. It's just a total mockery of Maury's work. And then you have Josh turn around and you see the series and it's 3 boxes, something like that. And we're supposed to believe that this is all of Maury's research files, and it's absolutely not. In that show, though, they say at the very end the process disbanded in 1974. So that's when they split up. This is the hard party line. Tom O'Neill, the author of Chaos, he has moved the goalpost as of the past 6 to 8 months and said late 70s, maybe 80. And I've pushed on that and said, well, Tom, I want to see what your documentation is because everybody else, including you, has been pushing 1974. I think that when we see this change into like the Foundation Church of the Millennium, the Foundation Faith of the Millennium, and then the Foundation Church or Faith of God. This is when they really go into their faith healing, like the whole faith healing revival movement, but they're also getting grants from the federal government, including from Henry Kissinger, to be able to go into prisons, hospitals, things of that sort. Now, they were able to do this before as the process, but they were getting in trouble in the UK because it was like,
Yeah.
why are Satanists trying to come into like these children's wards? You know what I mean? Obviously,
Yeah.
what we know about Jimmy Savile now sheds a bit of different light on all of that. But
Yeah.
as far as here in the States, it was under the guise of a religious organization doing this philanthropic work. And it's like, well, maybe, but Scientology has Narcanon and Crimenon. You know what I mean? So is the process doing the exact same thing? Are they recruiting people in jail? Because it's like
Yeah.
Manson was recruited in prison.
Yeah.
And they can absolutely infiltrate all these other groups because they're doing like verbatim the same type of faith healing that Jim Jones was doing, the laying of the hands. But they talk about necromancy. They talk about it openly. They're like, we haven't raised anybody from the dead yet, but we think that we're going to be able to. And it's like, okay, what are you guys talking about? And then, also being heavily involved in like the stuff with remote viewing and the psychic fairs and, biorhythm feedback and all of that stuff. Also involved in like the UFO scene. They get really close with Betty Hill, which I think is extremely dark.
Oh, wow. I
Um,
didn't know that.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
That's
weird.
wild.
When I saw that,
Betty and Barney Hill.
I'm like, can someone please leave her alone? Because, like, I have strong opinions. I think the government did that to them. And I'm just like, why is the process around Betty Hill like this is so strange? But, it doesn't not track because Scientology believes, like, Xenu, right? Like, Hubbard's gonna come back. And it's like, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
all these, like, alien cargo cults, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, the Nation of Islam has some of that stuff.
and
Yeah.
the Nation of Islam is
Heaven,
heavily
Heaven's
Yeah.
Gates was
Yeah.
was one of those kind of cults. Yeah, I
NOI
mean,
merged with Scientology a couple decades ago. I mean, NOI
Yeah.
teaches Dianetics. You have to go clear
Yeah.
now in NOI.
Yeah.
wow.
It's very bizarre.
Yeah. So I guess my opinion is changing. It's not just processes, tentacles, and everything. It's Scientologies. I mean,
Yeah.
they're ultimately the hand in the glove, so to speak. Wow.
To me, I think that Robert and Marianne and the other founders, because all of the founders, as I've done genealogy on all of them, these are not random people off the street. The only one that's been really hard to find factually is Marianne. And I do think, because Timothy Wiley, in one of his later Watchers books, and of course he chimes it up to his Watcher, which is like this alien thing that follows him around. The Watcher says that Marianne was working for intelligence, both American intelligence and British intelligence, and that's why she has no records. I think that there's a good argument for that because I think that she was involved in the Profumo affair. But the other founders, I mean, these people come from old families, old money, old, military intelligence, pharmaceutical companies, the Astors, all kinds of stuff. So I think that combined with that power, the process almost did too good of a job with the timing of the 60s and the counterculture, right? Cuz like they were able to just hang on the fringes. And so their propaganda has worked for a really long time as far as not getting caught cuz they're just like, "No, man, we're just out here running around in capes being edgy saying that Jesus and Satan should be friends. What's wrong with that, man?" Like, even though there's all of these terrible things that happen anywhere they're around. But at the root of it, it is Scientology. I just think that the process was a lot better at PR.
Well, it reminds me of the a court jester. The court jester, he plays the fool, but he controls the king. It's just it's
Yeah.
that's a great image of what we're talking about here. I have a question that just really jumped out. You mentioned the Blavatsky Society and some of your stuff as a sort of processing front organization. Have you found any connections to theosophy and the process related groups?
So the Blavatsky Foundation actually comes up in regards to Sirhan Sirhan. So
Yeah.
there's this really strange back and forth with the John Birch Society and the Blavatsky Foundation. They were running like black PR ops on each other at this time, and I feel like this is why I feel so bad for Ed. Like, I'm just like, I would be losing my mind reading through all of this stuff. Because, I think the Birch Society was trying to blame the Blavatsky Foundation for Sirhan Sirhan, and then the Blavatsky Foundation was trying to partially blame the John Birch Society and the process as well. As far as any sort of deep connections, no. I mean, the stuff with Sirhan is really confusing and convoluted, because the thing with Sirhan is that immigration services, and they've touted the same line for decades, is that so there was a party at the Polanski house. Sharon Tate overheard something that she was not supposed to hear in relation to Sirhan Sirhan, and the process commissioned the hit, and they paid the family to do the hit. Whether that's true or not, I don't really know. I think the more that I look at it, it's a very complicated and convoluted story. I do think that the fact that these investigations into Sirhan's sort of social life leading up to the assassination, as well as his religious activities, because, he didn't really hide that he was into Blavatsky and all of that. He wasn't
Yeah.
really secretive about it.
The
So,
Rosicrucians and all
yeah.
kinds of stuff.
Yeah, he was an occultist, so I
Mhm.
think that it's weird that those investigations were constantly squashed because it's like, well, was he hanging out with the process? Oh, and it's like, I get it. It's a different time. All these people are hanging out together. It's not that it doesn't make sense, but why would they not want people to know what Sirhan was doing in the time leading up to, right? I think that's really indicative that there may be something there. What she could have overheard, who really knows? I mean, the more that we look at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic and the things that they were involved in, I
Yeah.
think that Jolly West is a red herring at this point. Like, I don't think that he's the mastermind pulling all of the strings here. I
Yeah.
think that he's a player in it for sure, but, he's
He's a lower
answering to
level pawn.
somebody.
Yeah.
But it's, was Sirhan in Haight-Ashbury? Was he going to the clinic? I mean, we know that the Manson family was,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Sirhan said when he was shown photos, 5 photos, Jolly West was the only one that stuck out. He said, I know him, but I don't know where I know him from, because Sirhan doesn't remember what happened that night. They've been trying to retrieve his memory for that for years now. And Jolly wasn't just working in the Haight. He had a mind control lab in the San Bernardino Mountains. So who knows
Mhm.
what he was doing there? And he had that through the 70s.
So Jolly West, that whole fake crash pad he had, so that didn't fool anybody apparently, and him dressing like a hippie and walking around, "Hey man, come to my pad," and things like that. I guess was that just to throw people off? You think like he knew no one would be fooled by that, or
So I don't see, that's the thing is that so Dr. David Smith of the Haight Clinic said that him and Jolly weren't working out of the same building. Like he said that a couple months ago. Whether they were or not, I really have no idea. I don't know that Jolly was necessarily like hanging out with the hippies during business hours, I'll say. Because my personal opinion, and this is like my, I guess, noited conspiracy theory, is that you have these CIA doctors, right? Because obviously it's not just Jolly. There's no way it's
Yeah.
just Jolly. There's other doctors there. I know that Martin Orn is there for sure doing hypnosis research for ONI. So you have these doctors, they're experimenting with all these drugs, and we know that Jolly is really good at hypnosis. Now, bring in all of these Scientologists slash processians who are really good at auditing people. Auditing and per court records in lawsuits against Scientology, auditing is a form of hypnosis.
Yeah.
Um, you add in the drugs with that. Then you add in the honeypot blackmail angle. And then that's where someone like Marianne de Grimston becomes very dangerous and very powerful because not only is she seductive, she can also manipulate you, she can also hypnotize you, right? And if we're thinking about not just like MKUltra, we're also thinking about Operation Midnight Climax, like George Hunter White, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Like I view the family in and of itself As far as the girls, Dennis Wilson, all of that, I think that it was a massive, like, blackmail operation. I think that it was a huge honeypot operation. I think things got out of control. I do think that they were doing all of these weird occult things, these sacrifices on camera that multiple people attested to, that they were showing in one of the Playboy theaters in Chicago. I do think that these things were happening. I just think that it was another way to fund things. And, something that I discuss in one of my Manson episodes that I haven't been able to find anywhere else is that one of the directors of the Haight-Ashbury Clinic, while Jolly was working there, they were making pornography. And the Weather Underground was recommending people to them. And they said that the police would say, they said it was normal that people disappeared when you started filming, and that the cops questioned them about members of the Weather Underground going missing. Like, it's totally normal. And it's like, no, it's not normal. So basically, in my opinion, the Weather Underground was pimping out people to the clinic. The family probably was too. And that was probably just another conduit for them to launder money and to launder drugs. Because they were talking about chartering their own flights to Mexico for abortions for patients because it was illegal at that time unless you were declared mentally ill. And they had to hook up with a doctor in Mexico. Well, what else is going on back and forth at that time? The Brotherhood of Eternal Love. They're trafficking drugs, And so it's like if they can charter a flight with the blessing of the government or the state, at least, under the guise of this free medical clinic, this new thing to help control this hippie explosion going on in San Francisco, it's like that's a really good cover to protect your operation.
Kirke Order of Dog Blood. Was that just a Marianne side project? It's mentioned in Ed's book. And I know they called her Circe as well as Hecate sometimes.
That I don't know. I haven't figured that one out yet. I think she had a few side projects. But that one I don't know. There's something up with her and the spiral staircase that it's so hard to find anything about the spiral staircase at this point. I think that there's something there. I just haven't been able to find it yet.
Well, let me ask you this: is there a connection to that another Hollywood cult out there? What was it? The Children of God? Is that the David Berg?
Yeah, David Berg's cult.
Yeah, with River Phoenix and his family.
Rose McGowan.
And Rose McGowan. Is there any connection with them? Because, I mean, they pimped out. They had hookers for Jesus. And
they were on the fringes of the Jesus movement.
Oh, yeah. They, in one of it's called Visions of the Millennium. I think it's 1972 or 1973. The New York Attorney General had concluded their investigation into the Children of God. And so you see, like, what they were doing. You know what they were doing to those kids. And the process basically, like, joined arm in arm with them and said, we stand behind the Children of God. This is religious persecution. This is anti-cult, blah, 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 blah. I think that their relationship probably started in Canada. I'm still trying to suss out some of that timeline. There's a lot of weird activity with the process in Canada. They also link up and have a pretty big faction with Jehovah's Witnesses up there, which is very strange. But again, I mean, having 4 deities, you can link up with any group. But when you really look at, from the New York AG's report, when you read through it, a lot of the Children of God teaching is very similar to the process. And then is very similar to Scientology, except for Scientology, Hubbard made like all this weird language that's, impossible to understand. So I think that something that you had stated earlier is it's almost like there's an outline. And I agree, because you have all these cults. And when you really just get down to the brass tacks of it, it is almost identical. It's almost like they know what they're supposed to do as far as emotional manipulation, who they're supposed to target, vulnerable people, right? Like you're at a difficult time in your life or you're young, XYZ. And then after the church committee hearings, what happens? Jonestown happens, and a lot of these cults go underground and immediately seek tax exemption status. They weren't doing it to save money. I don't endorse that idea. That's not why. It's so that they're not going to get investigated because of what happened at Jonestown. The money is just a nice side thing for them, but you can't investigate us. This is our religious beliefs. How can you do that? And it's like, okay, well, there's that, but then also what else happens? All of these MKUltra doctors, like Jolly West, Margaret Singer, Martin Orne, Richard Offshee, they all turn around and go into the anti-cult movement and are doing the deprogramming. Why? Because they're the ones that taught these people how to program people. So they know how to deprogram, and they're essentially using the exact same, techniques, torture on these people that they're trying to deprogram. So it's, the left and the right hand are kind of greasing each other at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dana, the latest iteration of the process, Best Friends Animal Society. First of all, it's located in Kanab, Utah. Is it an accident that they're in Utah? Is there any connection to another well-known old American cult there?
Well, I think that there is. It's weird that they picked Kanab. It used to be called Little Hollywood, and there's
Interesting. I didn't
also
know that. Wow.
yeah, I didn't when I found that I was like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? It used to be called Little Hollywood, but when you look, a lot of like the spaghetti westerns were there. Like there was a lot
Yep.
of celebrities that stayed out there. There's also a fundamentalist, a fundy LDS sect out there, and apparently they're a real old fundy sect, and apparently they're pretty territorial. So I think that it's interesting that they let the process come in, right? I think that's a little bit
Yeah.
strange, but I think that that speaks to the sort of the alien part of it, like this whole sort of, because like you get the planet with your wives or whatever when you
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
die,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
It's the
and the
same thing.
process has
Yeah.
the gray god, like the gods that speak to them, that they
Yeah.
channel, whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that there's always like that weird alien bend to it as well. But yes, best friends is they're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in Mississippi, and I've found some humane societies, vets, different things right here in Mississippi. I know there's one in Oxford that's affiliated with Best Friends, and I'm guessing some of them just, hey, this is an organization we can affiliate with. Maybe they don't know what's going on. I don't know, but yeah, it's
We
all
don't
over the
know.
place. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's unfortunate because, they've flown under the radar for so long that they've essentially gotten themselves into every single sort of ASPCA, Humane Society type facility. They have a lot of legislative power because they have a lot of money. Um, they have their own private planes. Why do they have their own private planes? I don't really know. I think that they're a very dangerous organization. One of the investigators that was working with Maury Terry before he passed, uh, he had an informant that was living on the compound out in Kanab. And I've also seen footage from a documentary that never ended up getting released. But you see a woman being interviewed, and there's an officer there, a local officer. I don't know if he was a sheriff or not. But you can see out on the compound, like on the public road, they have this like weird little temple, and it's pretty far away, but you can see that it's lit up at night. But they're sitting there talking about how the cops are paid off in the area. No matter what happens, the cops won't do anything. But
Yeah.
the officer that they interviewed, he said, he's like, yeah, no, he's like, we get calls about like hearing people screaming out here at night, like all kinds of very strange stuff. And in Ed's files, I think it was from, I want to say it was maybe 1990. It was a Utah State Police intelligence report, and it was, just this long investigation that they had conducted. But at that time, Best Friends was using enough electricity to power a city, just the property at that time.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Wow.
And I guess when one of the informants took a tour, they said there were no animals on the compound and there were no people.
That's weird.
It's
That's
very
just
weird.
crazy.
It's
That's
very
just
weird.
crazy.
But they're transhumanist. So I think that they're running stuff underground. I think that
Yeah.
they're doing research underground because there are legal bare bones documents, especially the ones from New Orleans, that stick out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of their incorporation documents. The purpose is scientific research. These people want to live forever. William Sims Bainbridge, he writes all of these books now that We're going to live in like a World of Warcraft simulation. He has brought his ancestors back from the dead in some like well-known video games. Like I didn't know he was a part of developing some of these games. It would just make sense to me having people that are placed in certain roles within the government to give you access to certain things, and you have access to all of this, all of these animals. That's what you need to do this type of research, right? You need animals. They have it. And it's weird because at one point, and I can't remember which state it's in, I think it was in Nevada, it might have been Arizona, for a very brief time, they were doing animal husbandry. Even though they claim to be no kill, don't breed, don't do anything like that, but that's what they were doing. And then they shut it down. And there's no paperwork for it. There's only the official records in the state registry. Why?
Yeah, and why is PETA not all over that? So that's crazy. So why? This is another thing that is fascinating me, and Lindsay has brought it up. Why German Shepherds? What's the significance of German Shepherds, Dana?
It's Hitler's favorite dog. And also their DNA is the most similar to ours.
For real?
Yeah, very similar.
Wow.
They said some pretty, I want to say Marianne may have even, am I remembering correctly? She said some pretty openly supportive things of the Third Reich and the Nazis at one point in their earlier days.
So she imagined herself as a reincarnation of Joseph Goebbels.
Jeez.
Which is
Wow.
like preposterous to me, but it's interesting because again, I think that this speaks to the transhumanist bend. Like she has this phase in the late 70s where they say that she's indistinguishable from a man. Like she's dressing like a man and cuts her hair like a man. So I don't know if she was like, I don't know, trying to do Inspector Gadget, like hide from somebody who really knows, but they absolutely have a sort of Nazi or fascistic bend to them. And their take is a very Scientology take. They say that the Jews feel guilty for X, Y, and Z, and so that's why the Holocaust happened. I mean, this is what the process said verbatim. Multiple people that attended these midnight masses or midnight assemblies said that this is what they would say. And that is a very Scientology sort of take on the world. A worldview of Scientology is like, you did something.
Like their
It's
guilt attracted the
yeah.
evil or whatever.
Yeah, like, and don't even get me started on, like, the whole, like, body, Thetan, past lives thing, like, that's just on another planet, but, like, at the root of it, justifying a tragedy with that is a very Scientology angle, but also feeds into that sort of Nazi bend, because even, the processians of today, they all tend to be fascist or, Nazi
Anti-Semitic?
sympathizers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are they anti-Semitic pretty much too?
Well, I would just say that they're racist. I would say that they're just
Yeah.
blatant racist, It's,
Well, it
they're
goes back to Manson and the race war and all that. I mean, it's just amazing how it's all this mismatch of, but it all, in a weird kind of way, it all makes sense. And I don't know how to explain that to people. It looks chaotic, but it's really not. There's some sort of an order that's going on here, and you intuitively feel that order that's going on here. And
yeah, it's meant to be chaotic. It's meant to confuse. It's
yeah,
I think that the race war thing with, like, Helter Skelter, I think that, Tom O'Neill does deserve a flower for showing what a liar Vincent Bugliosi was and what a con man, and dangerous person that Vincent was. I don't think that it's so much like the race war. I do think that Manson was a racist, absolutely.
Mhm.
A lot of the girls in the family end up marrying members of the Aryan Brotherhood while Charlie's in prison. So Charlie's heavily tied up with the Aryan Brotherhood as well. I think that the stuff with Bernard Crowe, because that's kind of like the crutch of their
Yeah,
argument is that
the the
I
drug
don't I
dealer.
don't think any of that happened. I don't think
Mhm.
that any of it happened. Bernard Crow's not his real name. And when you watch the interviews with Bernard Crowe, like, he can't even answer the question that Manson shot him. He has to be prompted to say it, that Manson shot him. I think that that story, it just doesn't make sense. I think that something else happened. And I think that that something else has something to do with the other people that were moving drugs. as far as Wojciech Frykowski, and this MDA and this cocaine with Jay Sebring, because Jay Sebring is a much darker character than people want to talk about. And
Is that the hairstylist? Is it
yeah,
the hairdresser? Yeah, yeah.
yeah, he had a dungeon in his home. He would go to satanic orgies. Sammy Davis Jr. attended a satanic
Well,
orgy
yeah,
with
yeah,
him.
yeah.
Um,
I've seen pictures of him with Anton LaVey and who else was it? It was somebody else too.
Michael
Was it
Aquino.
Aquino? Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird Jay Sebring got him into that. Like, Jay Sebring is a really, really dark guy, and Jay Sebring was very heavy in with the mafia through his cocaine dealer. I think that the stuff with Bernard Crowe is just the way that Vince tells it in Helter Skelter is, he gets a phone call from one of his attorney friends with this guy, Bernard Crowe, who just happened to be shot by Manson. And he's got a great story to tell. And I'm like, okay. And then this guy just like totally fumbles on the stand, and he's the first person to testify as a witness in the entire Manson trial. So it almost like sets the scene, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that that's very strange because you have the mafia angle with the cocaine. You have the stuff with Wojciech Frykowski and the MDA. But that MDA is also being moved through the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. They are also treating patients as far as cocaine goes too. But then you also have the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, and you also have the people that nobody seems to want to investigate, even Tom O'Neill, which is Charles Decaux, uh, Billy Doyle, Thomas Harrigan, and Pick Dawson. And that's who I'm working on right now. Because all four of these men, now Charles Decaux, admittedly, military intelligence ties to Hollywood. He was working under this sort of secret operation post OSS called the Military Intelligence Specialist Services, I think, MIS. But all of these guys end up getting busted in major drug sting operations involving cocaine, MDA, and LSD, and they all get let go within a year of the murders. So I think that they were working for the Brotherhood, and I think the fact that Michael Reconciuto of the Promise Software scandal and the Octopus, I think the fact that he was hanging out as an informant in Haight-Ashbury with Abigail Folger and Charles Manson just kind of adds weight to that theory. Because what in the hell is Michael Reconciuto doing in Haight-Ashbury, and why is he hanging out with Shorty Shea and Charles Manson?
That's
Yeah, the whole Reconciuto and that whole Netflix documentary was another one where they pull you in. Come on, yeah, this is true. Let's get that. Oh, never mind, it's all BS. And yeah, I still watch them, Dana. I guess
do
I
I.
like punishing myself, but
So do I. I want to know what I'm up against. I want to see
yeah,
how much
yeah.
money and how much production value they're going to put into it. After I saw The Sons of Sam, I said, "Okay." I said, "All right, I'm going to start watching these." And I do watch them because I want to know what what's being put out there as the narrative. And it's interesting that they did a similar sort of character assassination, not as much, against Danny as they did with Maury, but it was
hmm
still, a bait and switch, I think. And it's really interesting that Tom O'Neill, ends up hanging out with the two guys that did that documentary about the octopus, because Tom O'Neill nor those guys in that documentary mentioned that Danny Casolaro's sister died in Haight-Ashbury in 1970. She allegedly unalived herself with drugs, which literally does not make sense. Why
Yeah.
would she why would she leave from across the country to come over to Haight-Ashbury by herself? So why was Michael Reconciuto and Danny Casolaro's baby sister, who he was very protective of and very close with, why were they both there at the same time, and why did she die?
And by the way, that's the American Conspiracy, the Octopus Murders, for anybody listening that may be interested in that.
Well, I like to watch and listen to stuff, not just to necessarily get true information, but they slip clues. I mean, they don't realize it because they make mistakes and they slip clues. If you go into it with the intention of like, okay, this is propaganda, this is BS, but I'm gonna watch carefully and see what they don't say or what they don't include or different connections, and that's what I did with the Maury Terry. I mean, it was just amazing to me. So
That one convinced me. Maybe I'm just a fool. That
no,
one convinced me of multiple shooters
it did.
and
Yeah.
It
process
did.
involvement.
It
Yeah.
did. It did.
Yeah.
But that's about all it did. It got us going to really dive into that we knew there was more than one. And I still saying that Berkowitz is afraid. He's petrified. They have something hanging over his head to keep him from telling the truth. So
I
very
so
dangerous group of people.
well, remember, David got his throat slit.
Yeah. Yep.
That's there was, I think, was it John Paul or was it Ben Rose? I can't remember who else from the cult was in jail, but they would call, because it was the process's outfits at that time, was the turtlenecks. So we'd call them the long necks. The long necks would come and they would see them in jail. And this is what I have been told by numerous parties. And one of these individuals, I think it was John Paul. I think that John Paul, he basically did what he had to do to get put into solitary confinement because he wanted to hide from the long necks. The corruption in New York is really obvious, right? Like, we can say that today and it's almost like a meme or like a trope. It's like, yeah, of course NYPD is corrupt. But at that time, and it's why I think Manson's really important to sort of look at as a mirror. You know, L. Ron Hubbard used to work for the LAPD. He's had connections with the LAPD since the 40s. So I'm trying to figure out just what connections are there in the NYPD with the Church of Scientology. But yeah, Berkowitz has a lot to lose as far as his life and the people that he cares about on the outside. I have had a very brief interaction with David. He's been upfront with me. He's given me solid information that has checked out, and he's not trying to get out. He goes to these parole hearings out of respect for the court.
Respect.
You know,
Yeah. He doesn't
it's
want to go. Yeah.
yeah, it's he's not going to come out, and I think that people should really ask themselves, why is Michael Franchese, Sonny Franchese's son, and Mike Caparelli, a PhD spiritual counselor who wrote the book Monster in the Mirror. You know, why are these two guys who both have mafia ties? Obviously, Michael has mafia ties through his dad, right? Why are these two men who are affiliated with the mafia, who are technically men of the cloth? I would say that they're wandering bishops. I think that that's what they're behaving as. Why are they going in and filming a sit down? Because that is what it is when you watch the interview. A sit down that is broken up into two parts with David Berkowitz, basically, where David Berkowitz, I did it. They do a mafia sit down and air it on YouTube. This was last year. And it's like, he's an old man. Leave him alone. Just leave him alone. You know, I mean, Josh Zeman showed up unannounced, was not on the list to be seen.
With tuna sandwiches, apparently.
Well, he shows up at the jail, and David was polite enough to let him in, but then he said, I'm not going to answer any of your questions, because David knew who he was. He knows who Josh is and what the angle is. You know?
I was thinking about Maury Terry with the tuna sandwiches. Sorry.
Oh, no, not Maury.
Yeah.
No, this is Josh. This was after Maury's passing that Josh showed up. It's, who does Josh know that they got him on that list and let him in?
Yeah.
And then David's put into an uncomfortable predicament. But David is nice enough of a person that, you know, and I'm not one of these weirdos out here that's like obsessed with serial killers. I think that David's original story, that he admitted to pulling the trigger at X amount, he was a lookout for the others, and he admitted to one of the stabbings. I do believe that people can change, but guess what? That's not my business. That's in my belief system, that's a supernatural act that's between him and God, and it has nothing to do with me. Only I can be a good example, and that's not my business. And also, he doesn't really owe anybody in the public an explanation per se. You know what I'm saying? But the people that do try to get close to him have ulterior motives. And I have no problem saying that, and I won't say allegedly, because I've communicated with Josh Zeman. I've communicated with Doug Messner, aka Lucien Greaves. I've communicated with Nicholas Schreck. I've communicated with all of these people. I've seen private communications with some of these people that they don't know that I have. I know that there's a big bend to cover up something. What the extent of it is, I don't really know. There's some people that think that David is sort of pulling this like the Jesus faction of the process type thing, right? And I just I don't see it that way. You know, I can only go based off of, my discernment and my instincts, and he seems genuine to me, but hey, people can be fooled, and again, it's not really my business. He's going to have
Yeah.
to answer for that when his time comes, but I
Yeah.
don't think that he deserves to have all these other crimes pinned on him, because there is a Netflix documentary coming out in about 3 months, and it is going to show on Netflix that they've pinned this new crime onto David Berkowitz, and they are planning to pin more. They've already started talking about this.
Well, let me ask you this, Dana. This is a question that I haven't been able to figure out. Why the motorcycle gangs? What are the involvement of the motorcycle gangs in all this mess with the Mansons and all? I mean, what's with the Rolling Stones? There was a murder at one of the Rolling Stones concerts by one of these
Ultimate.
motorcycle gangs. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
so go into that.
the motorcycle gang angle is, I mean, they're just violent, and they move the drugs. They're basically the street thugs for these cults, and
Okay, okay.
that's how the process described specifically the Gypsy Jokers, Satan slaves, the Hell's Angels is basically they see them as, the forces of Satan, but they'll go out and do what they need to do. Now, are all of these bikers necessarily going to be on board with this whole concept of, the reconciliation of Christ and Satan? No, but you can
Yeah,
certainly get them revved up about whatever they don't like, and what don't they like usually. They're usually Nazis, right? They usually have a Nazi bend to them. So you can make it into a race thing. And drugs is also a very good motivating factor. And it's interesting and sad, obviously, because when you look at, because I've read some of these books about the history of some of these lesser known motorcycle gangs, but a lot of their crimes are very ritualistic.
interesting.
So it's almost like, yeah, that tracks why you guys are being recruited by these cults, right? And it's like, are they doing it for the cult, or are they doing it because that's just what they're into? Like carving markings into the victims,
Yeah, that's very
certain number of
ritualistic. Yeah.
stabbings. Yeah, it's very specific and it's very strange. I also think that they're easy fall guys for them, because it's like, who's really going to care about a biker? I think that the
Well,
Gypsy Jokers was the only exception.
well, and the bikers too. They have a code of ethics, so to speak, and they're not snitches, and they'll stand by it. I've been familiar with some bikers that have come out of the whole bad part of it into the good
What
part
do
of
they
it.
call them? One percenters or something like that?
Yeah, and they have a code of ethics. I don't really think it's ethical, but I mean that's what it would be to them, a morality. They have a morality, and they won't snitch. So yeah, I've always wondered that. What was the whole interplay with that? But that makes perfect sense. They're the mules. They're the ones that are do the hard work and won't think twice about it.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's
and
pretty much it.
the whole Aryan card too. Yeah, cool. Oh, let's see. All right, I'm gonna ask you a few just what I call rapid fire kind of questions, and just answer them in a few words if you don't mind. Like, all right, so Manson, is he a crazy cult leader or is he a program patsy? What do you think?
A mixture of both.
Both. So, what about the process church? Is it an occult religion or is it psychological warfare?
Oh, no.
Might be another both.
It's also both.
It's a yes. I know. I mean, I just kind of came up with these, and this is the big one. This is how I kind of want to wrap up our conversation, if it's all right. Is if you had one name, not, and I don't want this to be dangerous to you in any shape, form, or fashion, so you can deny this, that is not yet public, who might be tied to what we've been talking about today, the Sons of Sam's, the other killers. What kind of person are we talking about? What kind of person would it be?
I would say, man, that's tough. One name.
I mean, if you don't want to disclose it, that's cool. I get it.
No. I mean, I've told them they should have taken me out a long time ago, because now everybody knows what I look like. I'll go ahead and say it here. You guys will be the first, since X has actually only seen it and whatever. The Nicholas Shrek totally stole my research. Someone that is directly connected now, specifically to Manson, and therefore the process, which is about to tie in all of my research together, is a man by the name of Michael Thieves, the Scarface of porn.
I've heard that name. I don't know much
Yes, you
about him, but
have.
I've heard
He
that.
used to
Yeah.
employ Wayne Williams. He was the boss of Wayne Williams, the Atlanta child murderer.
Yep. Wow.
Yeah, I've been working on Thieves for over a year. It's kind of been like a pet project of mine because there's really no accurate history about him. There's a very strange sort of there's like a weird because he's Greek. There's a weird Greek movement in the early days of pornography in the United States as far as like in the 60s, and
Interesting.
he he's a strange character, but I've directly tied him to
Just
Manson.
the Wikipedia page here is grains of salt, obviously. You got him connected to the DeCavalcante crime family in Newark, the five families. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
All
he's
kinds
tied
Interesting.
of
to all of
stuff.
them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I didn't realize the mob angle and all this. I mean, this was eye opening. The whole mafia. Wow. So
It's an important angle, and I think that it's an angle that that a lot of people don't want to talk about because these mafia folks, they don't like talking about the pornography angle because of the child abuse materials. They vehemently deny their involvement in it. They think that they have some code of ethics, and
yeah,
it's like, well, you say that they don't put hits out on women and children. They do. There's proof of that. They have. But also, they are happy to take money from the profits that they reap off of the abuse of women and children in these films.
that's insane. Well, Dana, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
You just opened
Could
up a whole new
have
world.
gone another hour.
Oh, definitely. Can I get your deets? Obviously, your YouTube channel, Writing Jewels,
Yes,
right?
and the podcast is What is the Process on Spotify and Apple, and Dana Duda on X.
All right, cool. Well, we appreciate your time. I know your time is precious
Yes.
and stuff, and so thank you. Super.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for listening and supporting us. And remember, stay naturally supernatural.